Nightblade tank is also very good. It probably has the best mitigation out of any tank if you have all your buffs going. But it is like 5 or 6 skills to have active all the time, which is a lot of magicka. But it usually has the best mag recovery out of all the classes as well. It's usually like between 21 and 2200 mag recovery with the same setup I have on every tank. And they lack a burst heal. So if a healer goes down and you take a big hit, even through blocks, certain bosses will hit you very low, like bring you down very low on your health. It can get really stressful because you don't have a button you can kind of spam to put your health back up quickly. If you spam one of your hots, it won't really do anything that'll help you. So it's very good, but a little scary, I guess. Necromancer tank, those are also very good. They have a lot of debuffs and buffs for the group, which is amazing. They all cost mag, and it's super expensive. So it can be really draining on mag sustain. So you won't be able to keep like 100% uptime on all those buffs and debuffs. But just having them up for a little bit definitely helps the group. The SAM sustain is okay. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. Templar tank. Definitely makes it a very good dungeon tank, but trials it's not good. The stam sustain is very difficult. You have the rune that you can stand in that gives you stamina while you're standing in it. It's not usually enough. And then as well, Repentance works really well, but only on mobs. It'll fill your stam bar, use it once, it'll fill your stam bar if there's like 10 to 15 enemies dead at your feet. But you can't really use it on bosses because there's very rarely dead enemies near you that you can Repentance and get stam back. So boss fights become very difficult. Definitely very good in dungeons. My main tank used to be a Templar tank. I kind of made it into a healer and put it in heavy gear, and it worked really well. But I tried using it in trials. I couldn't do anything. I died so often. So. Any questions on classes? Okay. So the next thing I was going to touch on is your gear sets. Most trials, especially if you're tanking Vet, the main tank will be wearing Yolnahkrin, which comes from Sunspire. It's the heavy set from Sunspire. I'll just link it in chat. There's 2 different types. There's the ones you get, the drops you get from non-vet, and then the ones you get from vet. The ones you get from vet are slightly better. It gives you, I think, about 1,000 extra health. Yeah, Uber. Too lazy to type. Yeah, so there's perfected and non-perfected versions of Yolnahkrin. It honestly doesn't matter which run you run. There's very little difference. It's just an extra 1,000 health. Perfected versus non-perfected. But it's pretty much the main tank set, if that makes sense. Almost every trial the main tank will be wearing Yolnahkrin, and then will have Alkosh jewelry and weapons. Alkosh is a medium set, so as a tank you definitely want at least 5 heavy pieces to get your resistances. I like to run 7. but some will run 5. Some will run 5-1-1. It doesn't make a huge difference. I just run 7 just because I like to feel safe. Yeah. So yeah, main tanks in most trials, especially vet ones. In normal trials, the gear isn't super important. It does make a bit of a difference, but it's not an absolute must. Vet trials, depending on who the lead is and which group you're running with, they'll probably ask you to run Yolna Alkosh if you're main tank, or Eben Alkosh if you're off tank. You always want at least one set of Eben in group. Usually the off tank will not have aggro on any bosses, so having Eben will provide that that buff and health that the group usually needs. As off tank, you're free to use Eben and something else if you'd like. Some, especially DKs, some will run Dragon, just so they can pump out war horns more often. It's completely up to you. The main tank will probably always be asked to wear Eben Alkosh though. The main tank will be the one that tanks the boss, or whatever boss is. Whereas the off tank will kind of be grouping ads or whatever, or doing special mechanics during boss fights. Torogs is also a good replacement for Alkosh. You can definitely run Torogs in place of Alkosh if you don't have Alkosh yet. And you won't get any complaints, especially since it's supposed to be buffed next patch, I believe. Yeah. Any questions about sets, like gear sets?
For them,
Yep.
were you going to touch on monster sets at all, or?
Yeah, I have a short list of monster sets that I like to use. I guess I can go into that now. I like Lord Warden a lot, especially since I always like to get 33,000 resistance buffed. That'll help as well. It helps the group quite a bit. It creates like this blue bubble on the ground, and that anyone that's standing in that gets a resistance buff. It's not super important. Monster helms are pretty free to run, like kind of whatever you want in most trials. I kind of run whatever I feel like, and I've never been told off or anything like that. As tank, I've never really been told what monster helm to use. So generally speaking, it's kind of up to you. I don't run DK tank a lot. I usually run other classes just because all my years tanking, I was tanking on DK, so I like a bit of variety at times. But I like to run Stonekeeper a lot. It's I can link a piece. It's a very good set to help you with your resources. It comes from a very difficult vet DLC dungeon, so if you need it, talk to Uber. Sorry, Uber.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that definitely helps if you're not a DK. Another option, is there a banker here? Ah, whatever. Another option is Swarm Mothers. Pretty much the idea of it is, if anyone has it on them, if they can link in group chat. I don't have any on me.
What is it?
On the where? The boat?
On the boat.
Oh, okay. Swarm Mothers is a good dungeon set, like monster set, but it's usually not a good trial set because, generally speaking, dungeons, you're going to have to group a lot of enemies, whereas trials, there's not a whole lot of enemies to group. Like, most enemies in trials are melee, and they generally don't run super far away. So normally you don't have to keep chaining enemies in constantly. Whereas in dungeons, since the DK is the only one that has a Magicka chain that'll group enemies, that kind of replaces it. So you can kind of run into a mob, inner fire the range guys, and hold block. And what it'll do is it'll chain in those enemies for you pretty much constantly as they hit you at a range, and it'll just keep doing it. So it's pretty amazing and helps with grouping. But definitely not a trial set. You don't want to use that in trials because there's definitely more beneficial monster helms to run. Another good one is Thorvikin. Oh crap, I should go back.
Hopefully you've got that out of your system.
That comes from another difficult dungeon. It's a Vet DLC dungeon. It's good if you're not running Heroic Slash. It'll apply the same debuff as Heroic Slash, and it's pretty much 100% uptime. So it reduces the damage done by 15% from whatever that's affected by it, and it's a very large area that it affects. Another good one that used to be super popular, it's not so much anymore, would be Bloodspawn. This would be back in the day when a lot of tanks would be spamming ultimate, as well as it gives you a bit of resistance. It's been nerfed a few times though, so I don't think it's super strong anymore. Another good one is Earthgore. Oh, all I have is a medium in the bank. That's another good one. It's pretty much a free heal, like a free, really strong burst, well, short burst, well, long burst heal. But that's in content where you feel like you need extra heals and have difficulty keeping yourself up. That can help you quite a bit, because whenever it procs, it's a big heal and it lasts fairly long. Symphony of Blades is another monster helm you might be asked to use. Normally the healers will run it. It's good to have it just in case. If you're running Altar, which is a good skill for tanks to run, it's from the Undaunted skill tree. I believe it's the first skill. It's very good to have because any one group can synergize it, and it's a big burst heal when they synergize it. So a lot of trials, the both healers, or even one healer and a tank will run it. So you may be asked to use it here and there. It also applies a debuff to the boss. Whenever someone's damaging the boss, they'll receive some health recovery. That health recovery can proc Symphony of Blades, which will help the DPS with resources. And that's all I have on my list. There's some other good ones as well, but those are my favorite. What were you going to ask about monster sets? Sorry.
Hey, Brax, on sets, so you said outside of trial sets, it would be Ebon and Torox. Those are the recommended ones? But
Yeah,
we don't have
Ebon,
any trial
Torox.
sets.
Yeah, you can do any trial in Ebon and Torox. If you aren't able to farm trials and you're on a DK, you can farm Ebon and Dragon, or even Dragon and Torog if you'd like. And those you'll be able to do any normal trial in. Most groups, as long as you had Ebon, you'd be fine, honestly. And even vet groups. Yeah. Any other questions regarding monster sets or sets?
Hey, can I ask you about attributes? Do you have recommended like attribute? I guess do you go all stamina or a little bit of health?
Uh, I all my characters are different. I kind of have a goal in mind, and then I'll base it off of that. So a lot of the gear I run, it's expensive, but if you see the effect, the multi-effect enchant, I always run the triglyphs because that gives you very even resources like stamina, magicka, health, and it ends up being more beneficial running that on at least your big pieces versus running like a health enchant or a magicka enchant. So normally I run that, I'll put on all my gear, and then I'll respec my attributes. And then I'll have goals in mind like I'll want to hit 35k health, maybe a little bit higher, maybe 36 in the gear I'm wearing, and then a certain amount of stam, and I'll base the attribute points off that. So some tunes I'll have 40 in health and 20 in stam and 0 in mag. Other tunes I'll have a lot less or a lot more in health. So it kind of changes per tune, because you do have a lot of class passives that'll give you max resource, especially with Sork. You get a lot of max mag, and I believe a lot of health. There's another class that gives a ton of health. I think it's Nightblade. Sorry, go ahead.
And those are with food, right? Probably typically the
Yeah, 35k with food. So normally I like to run try food. You can run that, or what's the other one? It's not pack leader. It's so normally I use that. There's one, I can't remember what it's called. Sugar Skulls. It'll do a little bit more resources, I believe, and as well it'll give you back some health recovery. Yeah. So there's different types of the long fin pasty food. Yeah, Baywitch Sugar Skulls is great too. The Sugar Skulls, I believe, cost an expensive mat. Okay, no problem. Thanks, Andy. I'll try and post a video of it as well. I hope the recording works. Yeah, yeah, I did. What else? Can't remember what I was talking about now. Yeah, Sugar Skulls is really good.
The food.
So you said there's different flavors of the longfin pasty?
Yeah, there's 3 different recipes that do the exact same amount. I think I have all 3 of them. Oh, I don't have any of them crafted though. But if you look at the resource number, they're all 3 of them are purple, and all 3 of them are food. They have slightly different names. It's like Rabbit Jug Preserves, and I can't remember the name of the other one. The other one looks like a bowl of soup.
But they're all a similar.
Yeah.
Buff, right?
Yeah. So it's only one of those 3 different types, which will give you like I think it's like 5,000 health and 4,500 of the other 2. Okay, 4,500 health and 4,100 stam and mag. But yeah, that's what most tanks run. You can get away with running Witch Mothers if you have a bit of extra health. Okay, thanks, Super. Have a good night. Yeah. Alright. Anything else for gear?
What about Lava Foot? I mean, it's max health and stam. That's not one that you recommend, because it has no magicka.
Yeah, it should be okay, honestly. If you can make the either Sugar Skulls or longfin pasty or jug rabbin preserves. It's usually better, but you can honestly get away with that, yeah. Your magicka might be a little bit harder to sustain, but it shouldn't be a huge difference. Okay, any other questions about gear?
Hey, NPCs can't really hit crit, right? You haven't seen you really don't need impen or anything like that?
No, impen's only for
PvP.
for PvP. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, nothing in PvE can crit. So you don't have to worry about that. Alright, I guess I'll quickly discuss the difference of tanking trials versus dungeons. And then that'll pretty much be it. And then I'll open it up to any questions about anything really after that. So tanking trials is a little bit different than tanking dungeons. Dungeons, you'll have a 4-man group. You'll be a tank, a healer, 2 DPS. Normally speaking, you can have less health in a dungeon. You can get away with 25k health in a dungeon, no problem. If your tank's set up for trials though, it's honestly fine to run it in that as well. It's completely up to you. Whereas trials, you generally need at least 35k health, because sometimes mechanics will be more than that through a block. Trials, it's a little bit different as well, because you have to coordinate with another tank. You have to coordinate gear, you have to coordinate who aggro's what. So it involves a little bit of planning. And it's important planning as well, especially in vet trials. You can't have the 2 tanks like taking turns aggroing and going crazy. And then what else? Sometimes in certain trials, both tanks will be required to wear Ebon. Vet How Raw would be an example where the group splits up. It depends on whether the group wants Ebon in both upstairs and downstairs or not. I think everyone's familiar with that trial, but the group will split in half. A group will go one direction, whereas another group will go another. Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Yeah, dungeon you can honestly wear whatever you want. I kind of just wear whatever I want in dungeons. It's not a huge difference. Generally, you don't get enough synergies to have really good uptime on Alkosh. Yolnakrin's is usually good to have in dungeons if you have it. Torogs is usually good to have in dungeons as well. And then you can kind of pair it with whatever you want. Ebon is good, especially if it's a vet DLC dungeon, where the group will need a little bit more health. But your sets are pretty lenient in dungeons. You run like weird sets that no one would ever run, and it'll be okay. And then, yeah. You have to be careful when you're in a trial with 2 tanks. There is over taunt, which will cause whatever you taunted to become immune to taunt for, I believe it's 10 to 15 seconds. So if I were to aggro this and someone ran up and aggroed it as well, and then I aggroed it again, it'll be loose for 10 seconds before it could be aggroed. So it's something you have to be cautious about. So the idea is if 2 different people aggro the same thing within 15 seconds, everyone loses aggro.
That only happens with 2 people though, right?
If they aggro it 3 times within 15 seconds. So it'd be if I aggroed it and then someone else aggroed it once, it'd be fine. But if I aggroed it again, it could go loose. Whereas if I aggroed it and then right after Jilly aggroed it, and no one else aggroed it again, then we'd be good. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's only 2 people, right? Like you can't like accidentally like spam Pierce and that shit'll lose aggro
You can
completely,
spam
right?
it as long as no one else is using it as well.
Okay.
You could totally spam it, just honestly stand here and spam Pierce all you wanted, but it's usually not the safest route because you will run out of stam, because it does cost stam. So generally speaking, when I'm aggroing something, I'll kind of keep an eye on the timer at the top. And the buff looks like a shield, a broken shield. That's normally the one I look at. And then I'll let it get down to a couple seconds left, and then I'll aggro again. There are certain times you're going to have to aggro like 6-7 different enemies at once. If you're tanking Hell Raw downstairs, you're going to have to aggro all those Welmas all at one time. And if you're over piercing or over taunting, and you have 5 pieces of sturdy, you'll probably die before the fight's over, depending on the group's DPS. If the DPS is good, you'll be fine, but if it's a little bit less experienced group, it might prove too much. That's why sometimes Inner Fire is a good alternative in certain content versus Pierce. Inner Fire doesn't debuff at all. It'll just do the aggro, whereas Pierce, Puncture, or Ransack will add some debuffs. But if you are Inner Firing, mostly in Trials, at least one healer will be running Elemental Drain. If your group is mostly Mag, that'll be fine. But if you have some Stam, the Stam won't get the debuff because LED Drain, I believe, is only Mag resistance debuff, whereas Puncture would be both Mag and Stam resistance debuff. Yeah, as long as it doesn't go back and forth too often, Alpha. If it goes back, so if I aggroed it and then Jilly aggroed it 3 times right after me and I didn't aggro it again, it should be good. But if I aggroed it, then Jilly aggroed it, then I aggroed it again, then it could go loose. It doesn't always, but it's happened before at bad times in trials and stuff, where the off tank will accidentally aggro, then the main tank has to wait a little bit to taunt back. Yeah. But individually, you can aggro it as many times as you want in a row, it'd be fine, as long as no one else does it, or spams it as well. There's a lot of different mechanics in this game, but a lot of them are repeated. So even some of the new DLC dungeons, it's repeated mechanics from old dungeons and old trials. But most of the mechanics you see in dungeons. So if you went through every dungeon and learned the mechanics, on normal, a lot of the time you won't learn mechanics as a tank. Especially if the group is experienced, because things will die so fast before you see any mechanics that you have to worry about. Whereas vet content, a lot of the time you will have to follow boss mechanics and other mechanics. Otherwise, you won't be able to complete it. So, doing pretty much every dungeon on vet, you're more than prepared to tank trials. You've seen almost every tanking mechanic in the game. And that's all tanking it really is knowing when to block, kind of having an idea where your resources are at all times, like especially your stamina and health. And then as well, ready to react, so either ready to dodge roll, or to block, or to call out a mechanic. That's really all it is, and you'll gain a good reputation by just holding aggro, not dying. Like, whether you debuff or not, debuffing is definitely important, especially in vet content, but as long as you don't die and don't lose aggro, you'll gain a good reputation for tanking. and then once you got that down, you can kind of work towards making sure your debuff timers are good and you have your debuffs going constantly. And especially if you're a DK, have that war horn on your bar and use it whenever you get it. Unless you're hurting for resources, and then time it well along with potions and shards. Yeah. Any other questions about trials or dungeons?
But I mean, Warhorn is really the only ultimate you're gonna be using. You don't use any of the other ones, like Spell Wall or Shield Wall or anything like that, or Magma Shell.
You can. Magma Shell, if you're in hard content that you're having difficulty with, Magma Shell is very, very good. Because it pretty much makes you invincible for 10 seconds. Like, there are still certain things that can kill you on a DK, like when Magma Shell's going, but it's very unlikely that it will kill you. It reduces all incoming damage to, I think it's like 2 or 3k damage each. So definitely in hard content, don't be afraid. Like, it's more important you stay alive and you hold taunt than anything else. If your debuffs and buffs are lacking a little bit, it's not a big deal. Especially in a trial, you have your off tank, he should be running around debuffing if he's got nothing to do. It's definitely a good habit to be in, to apply your debuffs when the cooldown is, but it's way more important that you stay alive and hold aggro. So if you feel like you're struggling and you need that Magma Shell, completely, like, don't worry about Warhorn. Especially, like, even if you're progging stuff as a group, that'll give the DPS and the healers and the off tank, like, keeping the group up. If a tank goes down, the group's probably gonna wipe. Whereas if a healer goes down, it's usually iffy but recoverable, depending on the other healer. But a tank, it gets really messy the second a tank goes down. So it's more important that you stay alive and hold the boss's aggro or whatever your job is than anything, really. So I know a lot of tanks, even like experienced tanks, that were going into vet trials and they're main tanking, and they're on a DK, they're using Magma Shell as their only ultimate. And that's completely okay because that means they stay alive. If you can get away with using Warhorn instead of Magma Shell, definitely, because it gives the group a huge buff.
There's the Shield Discipline ultimate also that's
Yes.
really cheap for DKs since it replenishes resources.
Yeah, that one's one of my favorite in dungeons. Especially if you're progging a dungeon and you're any class of tank and the entire group goes down except for you, you can hold taunt on a boss and res someone with that ultimate, no problem. You just wait till you get that ultimate up, even if the boss is heavying you. I believe it doesn't knock back if you take a heavy while it's up. I believe sometimes it'll get through though. It like glitches out sometimes. But in the past, I'd be able to like, what dungeon was that? Falkreath Hold. On the last boss. No, not the last boss. One of the bosses, you can put that shield wall up, res someone, and you'll have about, believe it's 1 or 2 seconds extra with shield wall not up while you're resing before the res completes, but it's definitely like a godsend in dungeons, especially for progging. It makes it very easy to get the group back up, even if the group wipes and you don't. So as long as you're alive, there's still hope, kind of thing. So I've done that in a lot of dungeons. It works really well. Any other questions? Okay. There's a few different ways you can kind of work on your survivability. One of the ways is Hell Raw. Last time I did this, when did I do this? Like a year and a half ago? A similar tanking clinic back in the day. At the end, as a group, we kind of just went into Hell Raw and Vet. and the idea is you run up to the door, the first door. So there's, for those familiar with Hell Raw, you kind of run all the way down that bland-looking area, and then you come to a large bridge, and then normally when you do that trial as a group, the group will wait on the bridge, and then you run across the bridge together, and then kind of run up to the door, and then kill everything from there. So the idea is you go by yourself as a tank into that trial, and you can run right up to that door, let yourself die, and then respawn and try and stay alive as long as you can. It makes you very familiar with your resources, because as a tank your resources run out, you die, like especially stam. You run out of stam, you're gonna die. So that definitely helps with keeping an eye on resources, especially with DK as well. Going up there, trying to stay alive, like sidestepping, kiting, blocking the heavies, making sure you block the heavies and recognize them, even in a group of enemies. It's a very good talent to learn. And then as well, it's a little bit of challenge to see where you're at as well. If you can stay alive for 2 minutes, you're definitely ready to tank vet trials. There are, if you're on a necro tank, you can kind of cheese it a little bit, which isn't the best thing, because you can go into it on there and do that as a necro tank and just use the Colossus, not the Colossus, what's it called? The one where you transform, the ulti where you transform to the large thing with like 100k health.
The Goliath or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah. You can transform into that, and you can honestly stay up forever on a necro, but it's not a good representation of trials, because the necro's heal is the Saith, where if it hits one enemy, it's a decent heal. It's not amazing, it's not horrible, but it's an okay heal. But if you hit like 10 enemies, it's pretty much your entire health bar. And that skill I think costs like 2k mag, so it's like dirt cheap, and it heals for a lot. Which isn't accurate of trials, because a lot of trials you're going to have mobs of enemies that you have to kill, and then you'll have a boss where it's just one enemy or a few enemies, and if you're tanking the boss, you're not going to have that healing capability, because if you're only hitting one enemy with that Saith, it's not going to be very much. So it's not like the best test out there, but it's definitely a good starting point to get comfortable with your tank and learning how to maximize your resources and your self heals. So on DK, if you're doing that, a good method is to sidestep most things. Make sure you hold block for the heavies, and as you take damage, your health will go down. You let your health get to about 30%, a little bit less, and then you do a quick Igneous and then a Dragon Blood, and it'll put you up to full health if you time it properly and do it at low enough health. So it's kind of a good little challenge to get comfortable going down to 30% health without spamming heals on yourself. And then getting comfortable with that and making sure like you know how to react when your health goes down to that. Yeah. And then someone else suggested to me there's for those like looking to tank vet Preglorn trials, there is a delve boss in, where is it? Preglorn, where it's the first boss. It's like, it looks identical apparently to the first boss in SO, which is the Manticora. It doesn't hit nearly as hard as the boss would, but it's kind of good to see if you're going to end up tanking Vet Sanctum Ophidia at any point. You can kind of see what the mechanics are, because a lot of mechanics are the same, I heard. So actually, for those if they want to go into Hellron and try it, we have 2, 4, 5, so we have 11 people, so we totally could go and do that.
Oh,
Has
I'm
a
not
kinda little
spec'd for
test.
it, but I could probably just watch you guys if that's okay.
Yeah, that's cool. Did you guys want to do that? Just go into Hell Raw, play around a little bit, see how long each person can stay alive. Alright, I'll just set it on vet. Yeah, it's already set on vet.
I got a baby, but I'll watch.
Alright, cool.
I haven't made my tank
so-
yet. Just wanted to kind of get a better idea from when I started.
Alright, cool. Were there any, like, questions at all, like, in general?
Not that I can think of at the moment. I mean, having that little document that you posted was very helpful. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no problem. And then I'll post this video as well. I hope it records properly. Yeah, and then as well, there are builds posted in PvE builds of certain tank classes. I'm not sure if there's a DK up there.
There's not.
I was about to
checking
check that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I can make one later. I just haven't played DK in like a year. So, alright, I'm in Hell Raw. You can travel to Braxane. And then also, if you need anything crafted, honestly, there's tons of people that have almost, like, most of the food recipes. Myself included, we're always happy to craft any gear, any, like, food or whatever you need. If it's pots, you may have to provide the mats, because pot mats can be expensive. But yeah, there's definitely lots of master crafters in guild. And as well, like, there's a lot of tanks in guild as well, like experienced tanks. If you have any specific questions, a specific dungeon you're progging, or a specific trial you've been part of, trial group you've been part of that you're doing a specific boss, you need any pointers on, like, feel free. Definitely, like, to preempt me or some of the other tanks in guild. Like Daddy Shack is another tank, good tank in guild. Mimus has done some vet stuff with us.
What's this?
Giggle has done some vet stuff with us. Jilly's done some vet stuff with us. So there's definitely a lot. Cerberus is also a really good tank. Fenris is a good tank. Like, there's a lot in guild that are definitely happy to help and answer any questions you may have, like anything, honestly, regarding class or whatever. Yeah. I believe most are DKs. There's a few Wardens, there's a few, Wardens, DKs. I think there's a few Necromancer tanks out there in guild. And yeah. So I guess once we're here, we can just go to the bridge. We won't be able to kill anything. Well,
The warrior and his
Alright,
army
thanks.
of Old Yakuda claim the citadel of Helra. Leave
Have a good
and
night.
live. Trespass and die.
So Brax, do you,
You have
use
been warned.
balance as part of your rotation?
I've never used it. A lot of tanks swear by it, though. It's definitely a very good skill. You do have to be a tiny bit cautious. There's part of the skill when you use it, you receive less heals. I believe it's 50% less heals for 4 seconds. So sometimes if you use it before taking a lot of damage, it can get kind of risky,
My
because you won't be able to
soldiers of
burst yourself
sand and
back up
steel will strip your flesh.
within that 4-second time period.
I'm sorry,
So
what
it
build
does-
was that? What skill?
It's called Balance. It's a Mage's Guild skill. It's the third
okay.
skill down. So it gives you your resistance buff, which every class has one except for Nightblade. Nightblade, it gives it to you through the passives. The same buff, but yeah, every class has one. Like DK will have hardened armor. Yeah, thanks Jay. Have a good night. DK is hardened armor. Warden would be Ice Fortress or Ice something. Ice Fortress is one of the morphs. Sork would be Lightning Form or Hurricane. Usually Lightning Form is better because Hurricane costs stam. Templar would be Ruin. and Necromancer be summon. Was it bound or no? Summon something. Beckoning armor. That's what it's called. Thanks, sausages. Have a good night. Alright, looks like we're all here. So we can run as a group up to there and then kind of wipe, and then I'll show where everyone can stand. Just run right up the door.
Light it up! You have come farther than those feeble undaunted, but you will fall just the same.
She's just showing off at this point.
Alright, so and once you respawn, you can come over to this rock. It's this rock over here on the right. I guess some people's left, some people's rights. Are you able to respawn, Kurt? And try and res.
I was muted.
No problem. Yeah, so we just go over to where the group is and then wipe here. This will kind of make it so one of us can go and try it alone, and we won't have to worry about the enemies attacking everyone else, kind of thing. This is where we did how we did last time. Just go ahead and throw some of this to die faster.
For healing. Jill.
Hey,
Saw
someone
you
healed me.
trio to me.
Jill, eh?
Yeah. Telling you, I saw her put up.
Alright, does anyone want to go first, or should I?
Yeah.
Alright. So the idea is, like, I'll wait until everyone respawns. You guys kind of just stay here. You can watch from over here. I don't think it aggroes everything. Last time we did it, there was no issue. Just being dead here. Or alive here, I mean. And then one person would run up to the door. And try and stay alive as long as they could in front of the door. You can kite. Make sure you block the heavies. And
What's
yeah.
your, can you tell us your kind of what your rotation's like?
Yeah. So, when I'm comfortable with something, if I'm not comfortable with something, my rotation's very simple. I run up, I pierce, I hold block. I use Warhorn when I get it. But once I'm comfortable with something, I'll, usually what I'll do is I will buff before aggroing a boss. So, certain classes may or may not have certain skills that you can use as a pre-buff before doing any damage. So if I'm a warden, I'll use the Netch. I'll put out an altar, which if you're asked to run altar, you doesn't do any damage until people start damaging the boss. So that's one of the skills that won't damage. You can do a few different skills. Any skill that won't damage, you can do that before. And then your first skill that does damage should be either Pierce or Inner Fire, or Puncture or Ransack. So it should definitely be a taunt, your first skill. And then once you're taunted, you want to do Pierce every 10 to 15 seconds, like your taunt. Normally my back bar will be Blockade. If I'm on DK, it'll be Stone Fist. Do that 3 times. Heavy attack, put in an altar, and then back pierce, buff up if I need to, and then just always kind of be ready to burst, heal yourself if you need it. So it's kind of like a mix of no rotation and a little bit of a rotation, if that makes sense. Versus DPS, which is all rotation.
So like here, with just this activity we're doing, what's your rotation or your kind of game
There
plan
isn't one.
going into this?
Just run up and try and stay alive, honestly. This is just like a test to learn how to survive, if that makes sense, especially when a bunch of enemies are hitting you.
You're just gonna
It'll be a little bit
kind of kiting and then just healing when
Yeah.
you can, and that's it.
just kind of doing what you need to stay alive, and then just that helps you. It helps a lot getting comfortable with your class. It helps you a lot because in order to do this on DK without having 3,000 Magicka recovery or something crazy, that's not possible. It forces you to time your Igneous and your Dragon Blood properly. It forces you to let your health get down, because if you used it every time your health moved a tiny bit, then you'd be out of mag very fast. So it kind of forces you to be resourceful with your resources and time your heals, pretty much, like your self heals.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So I won't really have a rotation. Kind of just be doing whatever.
What class are you right now?
I'm on a DK right now.
Okay.
Hey. Whose flowers are those, Jilly?
You.
It also teaches you how to time your potions and your ultimates, especially on a DK. So like, this is kind of the idea. Like, you can see I'm blocking and moving a little bit. You can block less if you want to. It'll just use less stam, but you'll take a little bit more damage. And then I'm trying to time my potions and my self heals to when I'm on the lower section of health. You can come in here by yourself, like, totally, and kind of just practice. I know a lot of tanks in our guild have done this before by themselves, and it's definitely good practice.
Are you heavy
And I'm gonna die.
swinging at all?
Yep. Huh?
Did you heavy swing at all?
No, but I could have. I didn't have to because I'm running 7 sturdy. Oh, I guess it does aggro. Yeah, so like, if you have stam issues, you will have to heavy from time to time. Generally with 7 sturdy, you'll almost never have to heavy. If you're running 5 sturdy, you'll have to heavy a little bit. If you're running less than that, you're going to have a lot of trouble not running out of stam. Like, especially in vet trials, because your stam goes down very quick if you have less than 5 sturdy. Like, it's very noticeable. So even like, you'll see tanks that just don't know that. They'll go in and try and content and just run out of stam constantly. So yeah, that's how I learned how to tank. I'd come here, I'd just keep doing that over and over until I got really comfortable with it, and I'd time myself and stuff like that as well. See how long I could stay alive. And like last time we did, who was it? Jers. I think Sharp was here last time. Daddy and Con. A few people. And like, we did this for a little bit and just practiced at this. And it made a huge difference for some of them. Like, just learning and getting comfortable. Anyone want to go next?
I mean, I just tried and I died in like 2 seconds, so I don't think I should go.
Yeah, so did I, but I don't mind. I'll do it again.
Yeah. You just try and stay alive, kite, use ultimates when you need to. And like, don't be ashamed by it in any way, because it is very difficult to stay alive. Like, it's a lot of damage going at you. And unless like you're very familiar with your class, it's gonna be very hard. Like, no one was good at tanking their first try, trust me. It's not an easy thing to learn. But it's definitely the most rewarding. Like, I was that 9k DPS for like a year of playing this game, my first year. And I wanted to do vet content, so I learned how to tank. And I've never had issues finding groups for anything I wanted to do, really, as a tank. And like, the same goes for anyone. Like, you learn to tank, and you're always gonna find a group, because like, even the group I'm in now, like, they're always looking for tanks, kind of thing. Like, experienced tanks. It was definitely like always a place for tank. So it's hard work, but it definitely pays off.
I wonder if you can grapple all those people.
No. You wouldn't have the mags to stand for it. Cool. Alright, yeah, I'll try and post a video within the next, or a bit, like a DK build within the next couple days. You can also look online and copy some other tank builds, it's up to you. Everyone kind of has their own preference. Like, even last time when I did the tank clinic, I believe I told everyone to do like infused mag recovery, and Sharp decided to go to Harmony just because he prefers it. And like, I've never seen the Harmony hold him back in any way. So it's all about personal preference for like jewelry and chants.
Do you have any people that, you know, that have websites that you recommend for tanking?
Waller's good for DK. I don't know if he still makes stuff though. Alcast is usually pretty meta, which a lot of the tanking setups, like, tanking is very like meta based. So sometimes you'll, as a tank, you'll be told to wear 2 of the same sets everywhere. Like, I have a set of Eben, Alkosh, and Yolnacrit on all of my tanks, and like, I haven't really needed any other sets ever. So you're kind of limited on those sets a little bit. If you off tank often, you'll have a little bit more leniency on what sets you can wear. But you'll pretty much be locked to Eben and something else, and something whatever you want to run, kind of thing. So, like, Outcast is pretty up to date on that. So you can base it off of his stuff. Outcast likes to do, I think it's 5 sturdy and 2 infused, I believe. 2 or 3 infused. So it's a little bit different than what I would do. I'd do 7 sturdy. But then again, it's all personal preference. You can do 5-1-1, you could do 7, like in weight, 7 heavy or 5 heavy, it's up to you. I like to do 7.
They usually...
Yeah.
No, go ahead, sorry, I didn't know what to...
But you
What
can
were you gonna
definitely
say?
base it off of Outcast stuff if you'd like to. Almost all tank builds are the same online. There are a few that run really weird sets. If it's not Eben, Yolna, or Alkaz, or, wow, Alkosh, if it's not one of those sets, it's probably going to be a weird build that people won't want you to use in a trial. Like, there's some Xynode stuff that's very not based on helping the group. So, like, as long as you base your gear off of stuff that helps the group, which is usually Yolna Alkosh for the main tank, because that applies the most debuffs to the boss for the group, increases damage.